Beatitudes, still focusing on Matthew chapter 5, verses 10 and 11 this time, and on Luke chapter 6, verses 22 and 26. Again, I encourage you to compare the two as to how they're worded, but in essence, they say actually the same thing. Now, first of all, these two passages remind us of what God's prophets in the past underwent when they came to the kings of Israel and warned them of what was to come if Israel didn't get its act together. And it also tells us as Christians that we too will also have our suffering. The prophets of old had encountered opposition and were even killed for what they said, but all of them knew that their reward would be great. Likewise, many who have followed Christ have suffered persecution, torture, death, because of what they said. And in some cases in the world today, Christians are still being persecuted. But we know as Christians that our reward will be great. You see, the world sees good and evil not from the point of what God desires, but from the point of what people desire and what people can do and get away with. My dad, as I've told you before, was a policeman, and he always said that people will do what they think is in their best interest and what they can get by with doing. And if they do it and get by with it, they'll do it again. Unfortunately, that is the way the world works. And Jesus said that right and wrong is not a matter of what you can do and get away with, or what benefits you the most. Doing right or wrong is what's right and wrong in the eyes of God. Anytime we live by Jesus' instructions, then some people are not going to get what they want, or what is the most beneficial to them, and that tends to make some people very unhappy. In our current day and culture, we have this do-your-own-thing attitude. For example, the attitude that it's my body and I can do with it whatever I want is carried over from the abortion issue into issues like taking COVID shots or even using illegal drugs. Our society today is so eaten alive with my body and that attitude and its companion statements, you can't tell me what to do, to the point that if anyone says you can't do that, it's illegal, it's immoral, and it's not ethical, we're immediately going to ruffle somebody's feathers. Because in the end, somebody's not going to get their way. Therefore, anyone who speaks up for what is right will always have opposition. Now, it's an old argument if you try to tell somebody that 2 plus 2 is 4, and they have a different answer in their heads for whatever reason, you're a liar. They'll fight and argue with you no matter how convincing or how right you might be. You're a liar because you're not saying what they want to hear. And we can say this modern world has certainly gone to the devil, but really have things changed that much? Did not the Pharisees call Jesus a liar and a false prophet because he was saying things they didn't want to hear? Did not the kings of old call the prophets liars because they went about teaching to repent and get back on the plan that God had left for the Israelites to follow? And that wasn't what these people wanted to hear? Are people really that much different now from then? No, I personally don't think so. I think people are people, and they always have been, and they always will be as long as humankind is on this earth. But Jesus made it very clear that if you're going to stand up for what is right, then you will have those that are not going to like what it is that you're saying. Blessed are you when men hate you, exclude you, revile you, and call you evil, because you're telling them the truth, God's truth. Luke chapter 6, verse 22. Then woe to you when all men speak well of you, verse 26 of Luke chapter 6. Because the reason they are speaking well of you is that you're telling them what they want to hear, as did the false prophets. You're not telling them the truth. You're saying to them whatever it is they want to hear. And that's why they love you so much. You see, the message is a very simple one. If you're going to stand up for what's right, you'll end up ruffling some feathers. People's feelings will get hurt because they're being told they can't get their way. They can't have exactly what they want. But the Beatitudes reminds us that your reward will be great if you tell God's truth and do the right thing in the eyes of God. Phil Yancey, in his book, Where is God When It Hurts?, talks about suffering, being poor, being hungry, being thirsty, being in a state of mourning, being persecuted. And none of this really paints a very pretty picture of being a Christian. But Yancey, on page 99 of his book, tells us that being a Christian does not put us into a hermetically sealed suit that protects us from all the dangers of this world. In fact, he quickly points out that that's really a good thing, because if we were isolated from the real world in that way, we wouldn't be able to understand those we have to deal with. We wouldn't be able to actually deliver the message of God as we should. Think about it. If we were bulletproof, then what difference would it make what the world thinks? Really. It's only when things begin to affect us that we realize that we've got a job to do. The Christian message is a message of love for your neighbor, and to do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And if your brother suffers, you suffer as well. So as Christians, we need to care what the world thinks. Not to the point of cowering into submission, but in order to understand where they are coming from so we can approach them with the Word and preach the Word to them in a way that will reach them. You see, suffering keeps our heads in the game, just as Paul's thorn in the flesh kept him from taking credit for things that truly were God's doing, thus boasting about himself and not giving God the credit. A Catholic nun by the name of Monica Helwig actually created a list of the advantages of the kind of suffering that is referred to in the Beatitudes, and her list includes the following. Suffering is an equalizer. It makes us realize that we need help. It makes us realize that other people suffer as well, so we're not alone. Suffering keeps us from putting our focus on things that can be lost, stolen, rusted, or burnt, and forces us to put our focus on things that are beyond this earth and also in other people. Suffering humbles us, keeps us from being conceited, as it did Paul. Suffering forces us to look for cooperation with our fellow mankind and not competition. Suffering helps us to distinguish between what is necessary in our lives and what is simply a luxury. Suffering teaches patience as we learn that pain and suffering don't instantly go away. Suffering teaches us the difference between a fear that is valid and a fear that is exaggerated. And suffering teaches us to look for hope, peace, joy, and love, and to celebrate it when we find it. The Beatitudes talk about suffering because suffering makes us seek something better in our lives. Indeed, it makes people seek God, righteousness, and justice. It also makes people humble enough to realize that we're alone in terms of our ability to create those kind of things. And when we're alone in terms of our ability to create love and hope and peace and joy, we got a problem, because we really can't do that. as smart as we are, as smart as we think we are, with all the technology we have, joy is still in the heart. We need the higher authority of God. We need someone that can give everlasting peace, that can give hope, that can give joy. Always remember this. The cherry pit is the seed. If life was nothing but a bowl of cherries minus the pits, then once that bowl was eaten, that would be all there is, or ever will be, because there wouldn't be any seeds to grow more cherries. Instead, we learn that through our suffering, that we can enjoy the cherries. Now, you do have to spit out the pits and be a little cautious so you don't bite down and chip or break a tooth. And that's the Beatitudes. They tell us that bad things will happen, and that's a part of life. But they also promise us that good things will happen, and that is a part of God's plan. Now, I'm still looking for a topic for our next Bible study, and any suggestions, please let me know, by person or by text, or email. You can use 502-876-3969, or lfc948@yahoo.com, or you can just write. Larry Childress, P.O. Box 97, Crestwood, Kentucky 40014. I plan to start the next series in February. Now, it's certainly been enjoyable for me to do this series of studies, and I hope it's been a joy for you as well, as a learning experience. We continue to invite everyone to join us in our services here at Crestwood, especially those of you who are watching and looking for a church home. And until I return in February, may God bless you and take care of you. Goodbye for now.